Hey, this is Gareth Webb, and you are listening to Breakout, a show aimed at cutting through the hiring noise and breaking down best practices. We'll also be tapping into the minds of other industry leaders so you can ensure your business makes the right critical hires the right way.
Jonas, hey, how are you doing?
Hey, doing great. Yourself?
I am kind of feeling a little too relaxed, I think. I've kind of allowed myself to feel reasonably festive this year, but I think that's because the year's been a wild one. So I'm like, okay, try to allow myself to decompress, but at the same time, there's a lot carrying into January. How are things shaped out for you guys coming to year end? Is this your year end?
Coming into year end here. You're right. Just kind of macro-wise, it's a year of highs and lows, no doubt. Maybe first half highs and second half lows, industry, economy overall. For us, it's been surprisingly steady, though. We haven't felt that nearly as much as maybe some other sectors have.
Yeah. Can you give us a bit intro into yourself and your background, and then a little on Phil?
Yeah, sure. I grew up partially in Sweden, partially in the States. Moved here during elementary school. Did not get a cool accent as part of that, unfortunately. But yeah, I've been in sort of tech, product management, engineering, that kind of leadership space for quite a while now, about 17-ish years. Started my career early on at Microsoft, and then took a little break and explored volunteer world for a while in South America. Then came back and joined Zillow, was there for a real long time. And then now more recently I've joined Phil. So I'm at about month 8 at Phil. I always remember how long I've been there because my son was born 2 weeks after I started. And so, keep track of his age.
He was born 2 weeks after joining?
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Way to start a new position.
Well, it's kind of funny, actually. So we hadn't planned it that way. But then as I was, talking with Deepak and the company, through the interview process, kind of kept that bit a little bit in my back pocket till we got towards the end. And then I thought, okay, I better tell them before they make me an offer here. And of course, they're super supportive.
Yeah, you never really know, do you? I think I get why you would do that. And I think, your background shows that you have longevity and consistency. So I don't think that would have been an issue. Tell us about Phil and why you joined.
Yeah, sure. I'd say the biggest reason I joined Phil is for the mission. Think about what Phil does. We really try to help people get medications easily, quickly, affordably. That's the basic sort of underlying thing we're trying to solve. And the place in which we do that is in what's called specialty medications. So these are typically more rare or more severe conditions where medications might cost $500 a month. They might cost up to $30,000, $40,000 a month if it's like a cancer medication, for example.
As high as that?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so anyone who's ever been through our healthcare system, which is just about everyone, knows that the administrative red tape is piled high, put it that way. So as a patient, what ends up happening out there is, a lot of people get prescribed a medication for whatever condition they have, and they don't end up being able to get it. They don't get it because this sort of, red tape is standing in their way. There's, it can be very expensive. And so getting that covered by your insurance can be a challenge. And then trying to get the ability to take advantage of, manufacturer support or discount programs that might exist can also be really difficult. Getting your pharmacy to carry and dispense a drug that's that expensive can be very difficult too. So really think about this ecosystem of, the patient, the doctor, the pharmacy, the insurance company, and the company who's actually making the drug, making the therapy. It's a pretty complicated ecosystem, and not all the incentives are necessarily aligned. And the end result is a lot of patients don't get the medication that they really need to get better. So our platform sort of joins all those different parts of the ecosystem to help those patients out.
And if, I moved here 4 years ago, I still don't understand it. And I don't think I'm an idiot. I have tried to get more educated around the whole healthcare system. It feels like it's rigged, but it's so big. So it's I get why there's pockets of suppliers. And as you said, you've got doctors, you've got pharmacists, you've got patients in different areas where the pure scale of the market and then the scale of the infrastructure or lack of and the red tape just means that things are expensive and old-fashioned and potentially bureaucratic. But technology has to be the answer, right? You kind of have to believe that there's a way of fixing it, and there has to be a way of, I think the word democratizing a marketplace can get overused, but anything that can make it cleaner, fairer, providing more elegant solution that works for everybody must be out there. So it sounds like kind of where you guys are headed. Just for people listening, stage, size, like, can you give us some of those numbers on the business?
Yeah, sure. So we're Series D, raised our D in 2021, and we're 131 employees now. So I lead the product team, so product management, design, process improvement. That's 13 of that. We've grown that group quite a bit. So when I started, I think we were 4, 5. So grown quite a bit over the course of the year.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty lean business, right? Like Series D, 130 folks. I know roughly some of the figures behind the business. I'm not going to say now, but I would say it's a bit of a masterclass given what we've seen this year in lean, effective scaling of a business whilst maintaining high growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that I did quite a bit of diligence on, when I was personally joining, but, encourage anybody who's thinking about changing jobs to think about too, is how is that business actually being run? And is that happening in a disciplined way, or is that happening in a sort of, too exuberant way as we saw for a long time? So when I joined, Phil, it was still like in the, money is free world. But that, which it was, right? I mean, 0% interest rates effectively. And so it was pretty clear to me that was not going to last. And so, as I was thinking about, the kind of company that I would want to be at, a lot of folks would sort of tout, the biggest valuation or how many people they've hired over the last year or that kind of thing. And, just kind of massive numbers. To me, that was always kind of scary. So when you think about a company that is, spending that much money that quickly, they're signing up for some really, really big expectations to grow into. And sometimes they'll make it and sometimes they won't.
Yeah, we can go into that a little with your Zillow journey. But yeah, I would say it's very interesting to me when we have really quite nice access to execs like yourself and Deepak, your CEO. When I was first intro to Deepak, like I was told he's a bit of a tough customer, but I actually really liked how pragmatic he was. And we had done a bit of hiring for you guys, but then I remember talking to Deepak on the phone, and it was around April time, I think, when people were just starting to realize that there was a change happening. And he'd asked me what we'd heard from other firms and VCs and PEs. And I was like, yeah, I can see that the party's not over, but like, there's definitely a break happening here in like, the kind of like business as usual from the last few years. And he said, yeah, like we've been getting told by various folks that, pump the brakes. And so it always comes top down, doesn't it? Like if you've got a dialed in, pragmatic, open-minded founder CEO like a guy like Deepak, I think then the business is in good shape. If everybody's just there for the adrenaline rush of growth, irrespective of what lies ahead, then it doesn't end too well, which is unfortunately what we've seen this year in an abundance.
Yeah, I think that's right. When things are good, you have to remind yourself that might not always be the case. And when things are bad, you have to remind yourself that's not always going to be the case either.
Very good point. Yeah, so don't dwell on the negatives. Before you joined Phil, you were with Zillow, which everybody knows. And I think you're probably one of my most used apps, like during lockdown when I was just like being nosy. And for sure. I'm a big fan of looking at bargains and looking at what people have done with places, and the pricing movements in the last few years since I moved here have been insane. So the big question I have for you is, why did you stay there so long? Because it's rare to see for product staff or leaders to do that level of a tenure. Was it about 10 years?
Yeah, it was 10 and a half years. Yeah. I had not planned it that way.
So what do you put that down to?
I would say the first was the mission. So that's kind of the bigger sort of like higher minded thing.
What was the mission when you joined? Because I'm sure now there's many imitations and it's quite commonplace to see real estate sites. But at the time, what was their whole mission?
Sure. I mean, it's a very consumer focused mission. So it's always about, helping people make these big changes in their lives and make them in a good way and make them in a way that, empowers them with more information to be able to make the right decisions. If you think back on your life, like a lot of the, big stages in your life are about where you lived, what house were you in, and who did you live with, and where was it? And so that kind of roof over your head is like such a big impact. And, Zillow is very much a company focused on helping people, make those decisions well and find the find the house and the next move that's going to be right for them. If that's like, relocating to another city, or you have a family that's growing because you're having kids and you want to make space for them, or you're retiring and you're downsizing. Like all those things are just these like pivotal moments in people's lives. I think both from an emotional standpoint, but then also from a financial standpoint.
Yeah. The three things, apparently the biggest things in people's lives are exactly that. Where do you live? Who do you live with? And what do you do for a living? Like those are the three biggest sort of things that cause the most stress or upside for people.
Yeah,
obviously health,
factors.
but like take that aside. What made you stick around? Obviously it was successful.
Yeah, so I think that mission, feeling like you're doing something that mattered, was a big thing. I think the other one was, just more on a personal level, like I had a lot of great growth opportunity there. So it's a company that really, supported people to be able to, take on new challenges, be able to, try new things out, take on more responsibility. And so, both did I feel like I was doing something that was important, but also I felt like I was like getting to grow and getting to improve myself throughout the process. That also, I think, just kept it interesting. If I'd been kind of turning the crank on the same thing, year after year, then probably would have gotten bored pretty quickly. But having to do and getting to do these like different things really made it so that I felt like I was challenged all the time.
Yeah. And was there an inflection point for you, like a spark, like a decision-making moment? Was it you decided it, or was it your leadership where you would go from being an individual contributor through to like taking quite an aggressive leadership track?
Yeah, I guess that was mutual. It was something that I wanted to do, and it's something that then there was an opportunity in the business for me to do pretty early on. I think maybe, a year after I joined there, I think. So your question is like, why?
Yeah, why? What happened? Yeah.
Yeah, for me, so kind of came into the product management role and loved sort of the like technology and building aspect of it, but always really enjoyed too the kind of the people aspect of it. As a product manager, a big part of your job is sort of like unlock the productivity of the people around you. Mm-hmm. And that's what a manager is really doing as well, a direct people manager. And so to me, that was always a big part of my job motivation before being in a leadership role. And then it was a pretty natural transition to sort of take that on in a more direct way as a leader too.
And how did that happen at Zillow? Was that like, were you just directed to do it, or were you given like a leadership mentor? Was there a program? Because obviously it's a scaling business. Was there infrastructure to help you become a better leader?
Yeah, there definitely was. And I think we got a lot better at that over time as we grew too. So when I joined Zillow, we were small. We were 85 employees when I joined. Okay. When I left, we were about 7,000. So you can imagine like the infrastructure for leadership development and all that stuff. We really kind of built that up through that journey. Initially there was not much there.
Yeah, that's crazy. I cannot imagine it. So the bit that I always look at with people like yourself is when you start somewhere, and I wouldn't call it classical training, but I think there's never much that can go wrong if you go into an environment like Microsoft to start out with, right? I think especially if you're a computer scientist or a software engineer, looking back, like how do you feel that set you up? Like that was your first proper like full-time position out of college. Was that right?
Yeah, that's right. I don't know if I entirely agree. You can go wrong because you can easily get stuck there. That's the thing. Yeah. That's the thing to be careful about. It's very easy to get stuck in that kind of environment. Yeah, no, I think it set me up pretty well. Kind of teaches you a lot of the core fundamentals of how to do things at scale and like the core fundamentals of customer focus and like basic skills of the job. So I'd say that I think was good. It's also just kind of a good resume builder if you're trying to be tactical about it. That wasn't my goal, but having sort of a name brand on there, I think helps.
Do you feel the same way now? Because when you did that, it was like 15 to 20 years ago. Do you think like here in 2022, 23, do you think it's the same applies for people?
Yeah, I think so. I think there are good things that you learn at those companies, and there are things that you learn of what you don't want to do as well. This was Ballmer era Microsoft, and it was very political. It was very slow.
Yeah.
I think, right when I joined, they had taken, I don't know how many years to do like Windows Vista or something. I can't remember. And the whole project had, gone on for 2 years and then got canned and restarted and then got going again. I think it maybe took them like 5 years to ship a version of Windows. So, on the one hand, you got to learn some fundamentals. On the other hand, you got to look at some stuff like that and be like, whoa, okay, that doesn't seem right. I want to do that again. So, lessons both ways, leading by example and then maybe by counterexample too.
Yeah, I think that exists everywhere as well, doesn't it? Right? Like some people can go to a startup because they think it's glamorous and fun, and then they don't have much resource, and you're really out on your own to kind of make things happen. I have 2 kids now, and I would definitely, depending on their interest and passion, like if going into an organization like that is like, as long as you know what you're getting into, like a Microsoft, and it's a good grounding at the very least, right, in terms of like operating in a, as you said, I'm sure it's still political. Like I know it was very political then, but like any big company has a degree of that going on. But I think it sets people up with it's like an extension of undergrad, right? Just like more commercial learning. When you started off in engineering, like what was the move to product, and how did that happen?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, I had a computer science degree. In terms of professional life, I was always in product, or I started in product straight out of school. Yeah, Microsoft at the time had this really great program, actually an internship program in product. Product was not really developed as a discipline at that time. So there was, Microsoft had it a little bit. Google, I think, was maybe a few hundred, maybe 1,000 employees. This was right around the time they started their APM program, which is very famous. And then, there was product management as a discipline in a few other places, but not very well established. So I really was drawn to it because of the sort of like breadth of what product role does. You could be technical, but you could also, like I said, be focused on the people and empowering a team. You could be, customer focused. You got to sort of wear a little bit of each hat, and that was always really attractive to me.
Yeah. So that was actually a very interesting way to transition into one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because whenever we talk to CPOs or like founders or people hiring like a product leader or product manager, there seems to be buckets or categories of product managers. You have like the more technical, you have the more design-led, you have the more growth-led, you have the more like operational execution specialists, and then you have like people that can do all. How do you think about that? Like, do you have buckets and brackets of product manager types, or do you feel like it's more of a blend of skills? And then like, how do you assess for that? So one of the things I really want to dive into here with you is like, what do you look for when you're hiring for product managers or product leaders? Like, what are the key things you look for, and in the context of what type of product hire you're trying to make?
Sure, yeah. I think there's a fundamental set of things that's pretty universal for product hires. Mm-hmm. And then those other things that you mentioned, I think, maybe tailor a little bit more to what the specific role is. So, hiring product folks especially, but any role really, I think what I mentioned earlier around mission alignment is really, really important. I look to hire people who, are going to be on that mission. I think about it as missionaries rather than mercenaries. Mercenaries think about the person who's, just trying to go for, highest salary I can get anywhere, stay there for a year and then go somewhere else. Those are the kind of folks who, they're more in it for themselves than they are for what the company is trying to accomplish or for the success of the company. And they end up not adding as much value as you really wish that they would. So that's one I would say is mission alignment. I think strategic thinking and then ability to work with others are the other 2 big ones. On the strategic thinking side, this is really about, are you able to have empathy for your customers and your stakeholders? And then are you able to translate that in a way that you can make them be successful and the business be successful at the same time? And that's a difficult skill to teach, but a really critical one that shows up in every product role that I've seen. And then the last one is around ability to work with others. Are they going to be a my way or the highway type of product person? Are they going to be able to take input? Are they going to be able to be transparent about when things are going well and things aren't going well? Those are really things that set up their learning cycle for them to be able to improve and for them to be able to, approach the product decisions they make in a way that has humility versus sort of assuming they know the answer.
Okay, so just one step further on those 3 things. So mission alignment, strategic thinking, and then like communication, ability to communicate or collaborate. What evidence do you try and look for? Because I think they're absolutely spot on, but knowing that somebody truly is mission aligned or mission driven, knowing that they can truly be strategic and have empathy, and then being able to collaborate, communicate well. Like, what are the evidence signals that you look for there, or the red flags?
Sure. I'd say the first and the last one, so mission alignment and working with others, really the best evidence is what they've done in the past. So, if they've jumped to many different jobs and, kind of talk through with them, like what are the reasons that they made those different choices or why they jumped each time, you kind of get a sense for sort of what their internal motivations are. Similar, you hear people talk about, how a project went well or didn't go well, or, when things went sideways, how they resolved a conflict with someone, just kind of how they characterize accomplishments as well. You can see whether they're focused on themselves versus on the team, and understanding, the things that they're bringing that are positive and the things that they might be bringing that are negative too. So I think the historical is really big on those 2 points.
Yeah, it's the me and we versus the I, or this worked because of me, and this failures were like engineering team, or just things out of my scope. I think I hear that quite a bit. It's like successes can be sort of aligned to the self and failures to the others, and the use of language and the evidence, like of the track record, as you say, but like how people own successes and failures is quite indicative of like the ego or the level of empathy or how well they can sort of fit within a team, and the intellectual honesty.
Yeah, I totally agree.
What about the middle one, the strategic thinking?
Yeah, strategic thinking, I think the historical can be really indicative too. I think the challenge always with that is trying to figure out how much did someone sort of create that thinking themselves versus how much is it sort of something absorbed from elsewhere. So I'll give, example of myself in my very first job in my career. If someone were to ask me to explain the strategy of the product I was working on, I could probably do that pretty well. Does that mean that I went and created that strategy? No, probably not. It's something that I had, absorbed from around me. So trying to figure out really like what were those strategic insights that people made in the past. And then the other one that I'm maybe a little bit old school on is, I still really like to do case questions and really like people to walk through hypothetical examples and just kind of think out loud together. That's ultimately what you're going to be doing in the job together. So doing a bit of practice of that in an interview, I think really helps.
I don't think it's old school at all. I think it's lazy to not do it. And like in markets like 2021, where there's this mad rush to hire people, and then there's just, the rolling over of, oh yeah, cool, whatever, we'll just drop our interview standards to get the bum on the seat, is insane to me. And we've had clients where we've said, oh, what kind of case study are you doing, or what kind of assessment? They're like, oh no, we're not doing that. We don't want to put a candidate through that. And it's like, well, why on earth not? Like, that's what you're going to be doing, and you're going to be paying their salary. It's almost like it's the other way around. It's like we're begging people to come here, so we want to make it really easy. Partly, again, why there's so many bloated companies that are cutting folks. And I think those case questions, or nothing arduous, but like if someone cannot be bothered to put in, let's call it an hour to prep for an hour's Zoom. So we say it was a product manager to sit with you and do a Zoom for 45 minutes and collaborate. Like, what signal is there that they really care about the job and the company and want to do it? Like, if they won't do that. So, we urge people to do it. I just think it's a real good, diligent way of assessing fit, assessing interest and capability. I think that's going to change now, right? I think people will be more stringent on those things. But yeah, last year we saw people laughing at it or paying the person to do it. So we've heard a lot of that. I don't know if you've encountered that, but like to do a software coding test or to do a product case, they will comp people for the hours that they've put into it. And that baffled me.
That is crazy. No, I had not heard of that, but I would never do that.
No, I can imagine it. Like, you just be moonlighting, doing interviews for every week to pick up a few $100 to share some IP. That's the state that the world got itself into last year. I haven't heard it this year, so I don't think we'll hear of it again.
I think too, just from a candidate perspective, like I wanted to do more interviews like with Phil, right? I wanted to spend more time with the team because I want to make sure it's right for me too. So it's much better to figure that out, that you're not the right fit. Either you figure it out or the employer figures it out through the interview process, than to, show up in a job, not be the right fit, and go through a torturous process of, you being frustrated and the employer being frustrated, and then it not working out in the end anyway. That, is a far worse outcome.
Yeah, we are doing our best to try and educate folks who are maybe they haven't changed jobs in 5 years and they've come to us to look at options. We don't want them to just jump on a knee-jerk reaction or get the first thing that gives them that dopamine hit. It's like, this is a decision-making process. You should be thorough. You should know upfront kind of like your objectives, the same for an offer, like all of it. It drives me nuts because people will spend like 2-3 hours a night for a week or two organizing a weekend trip somewhere, but they won't spend an hour or two polishing a resume or a LinkedIn profile or really thinking about like, I've got to do a case or I've got to do some work for a significant career move. So I think it's just a priority thing. And we really try to say to people that it's exactly that. It's a two-way relationship building exercise. I've done enough to know that like this is going to work because culturally and communicatively and intellectually we're on the same page. But yeah, it's become very slapdash because I think I've been allowed to get to that mindset where it's, to your point, the money's free, so the hiring's too easy and the growth's just like, oh, we need it done, and it's not stringent enough. So Jake and I were talking the other day about like a return to rigor. It's kind of like the world needs that across all things.
Yeah.
And just on the other piece, so for your universal, we came off track slightly, but universal traits, so mission alignment, strategic thinking, being able to communicate and collaborate well. The more tailored pieces, how do you kind of put product folks into different brackets and how do you assess for those on the more niche hires?
Yeah, sure. That's just going to vary by the job, I would say. So if you have a very, deeply technical, let's say like a back-end data system that you're looking for a product manager for, then you're going to want somebody who has domain expertise there. If you want someone on the security side, you're going to want the depth there. If you want someone who's going to be, purely consumer UX, then you're going to want someone who's much closer to the design side. Maybe they have some background there, and who's also going to be, really good on like, consumer funnel analytics, for example, and closer to the marketing. So that I think really just is the domain expertise when you think about the specific job.
Yeah, I'll ask you a pretty specific and tough question, but thinking back through current or like probably, I guess, more Zillow, like, can you think of like the things that really set apart certain folks in your teams there? Like some of the standout traits or characteristics of people that were just absolutely stellar product professionals, like no names, but what was it?
Yeah, let me think about that. I think the strongest product folks I've seen are ones who have a lot of consumer empathy, understand the consumer scenario, can really put themselves in those shoes, but also recognize that their understanding of that persona is limited. As product builders, are not always the consumers of our product, not the paying customer, right? And it's very easy to construct an image in your mind of what your customers need, and then spending large amounts of time building for that and having a slow cycle time of understanding whether you built the right thing or not. So I can, come up with an idea of, I think, everybody's going to love, some crazy thing, right? That maybe I love. I can spend a year building that. And then when I get to market, I can find out I was wrong. And that is just, hugely, hugely expensive, wasted time. So I'd say that the very strongest product managers that I've seen, that I've ever had in my groups, are the ones who, have the consumer empathy, have the consumer understanding, recognize the limits of that understanding are high, and that they need to, test and validate their way into validating whatever their theories are.
Yeah, so they may well be the smartest person in the room, but there's nothing that can replace like actual perspective and being in someone's shoes. You will never know that, right? So just a case of iterating towards the truth of actually what that user needs and wants and what they're going to keep using.
That's right. Yeah. I think about it as the humility of recognizing the limits of your knowledge.
Yep.
If you're willing to recognize that you don't know, then you're willing to approach things from the perspective of needing to validate along the way and needing to test things. And that's true for product builds. I'd say that's true as well for, how people operate internally. In other words, if I'm working with another team internally, I have to recognize that I don't really know what frustrates that team, what challenges they have, what's going on for them that week. And so it's easy to, make assumptions about that and maybe be frustrated by an interaction, but you've got to also have that humility to remember that you don't really know.
Yeah, especially after 2020, 2021 and this year, like everyone's living wildly different lives, even in the technology ecosystem and just in the broader sense of like, the United States. And there was that saying, like even COVID, right? It's like we're all in the same boat. It's like we're not. Like everyone's in the same ocean, but everyone's in a different type of boat. A couple of things to wrap up, because we're nearly on time. You're a CPO. A lot of the people we are targeting, speaking with, who come to us are hoping to be in your seat one day. They are product managers, they are principals, they are directors, they may be at the VP level or trying to get there. What are the things, top 3-4 things that you would say to people to go away and master if they want to be a CPO at some point in their career, having got there yourself?
Sure, yeah. What would I say? I would say not something that I really tactically targeted or built my way towards either. I think the biggest thing is be good at what you do and be well-rounded. I think those are the biggest two things I think about. How do you be good at what you do? To me, it starts with liking what you're doing, and then it's really caring about your customers, and then it's really caring about your people that are in your team. If you do those things, you like what you do, you care about your customers, you care about the people in your team, then it'll drive you to do the right things that are going to make you, valuable in whatever role you're in. And then from there, you're going to have a lot of success in your career.
Yeah, I agree. What about like the kind of notion of, you touched on like, if you move jobs every now and then just for a bit of a bump in base, but like, I would imagine that not everything was perfect when you were at Zillow, even though you had a really good run there and the growth was insane. Like you would have had approaches halfway through that 10-year stint and you could have moved on. But like some of the people that I see that really do last out and become very, very, very like masterful in leadership positions have toughed out some shittier times. They don't just kind of like chase the money, right? There are those VPs, like we can see them a mile off, where it's like, oh, I've now gone from Series A, we haven't blown up, or we're pre-IPO, but we didn't IPO this year, so I'm gonna go over there where they've just raised Series B. Like I see that everywhere. You obviously just got head down for a while. It must have worked out great for you, of course, but like there must have been times where you could have gone elsewhere, but like I think that longevity and sort of like resilience and consistency is something that everybody has to sort of prove they can endure. And there's nothing really you can do other than stick around somewhere for a while to sort of demonstrate that, in my opinion. What's your take on that?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think leadership is easy when everything's going well.
Yeah.
When all the charts are up and to the right and, funding is going well and you're adding more people to the team, leadership is very, very easy. When things are not going well, that's when it gets hard. And that's when you figure out whether you're actually doing a good job or not. And so, you got to be able to have some staying power to weather through those. Obviously, there's limits to whether you do that. But, over the course of those 10 years at Zillow, we had, lots of ups and downs. Even though the overall trajectory is very positive, there were years there that were very difficult too. And, resets and things that we had to really struggle through. So you learn a lot from that. The other thing I would say too with, short stints is, especially in our leadership role, it takes a while to get really valuable. The first, 6 months, year on a job, like, are you really adding that much value? I always question that myself, even in my role now. And so taking the time to where you can really hit your stride and deliver the value versus, put something on your resume. I think that's what's going to actually build you the skills so that when you do get into the job that you're trying to get to and you do get that responsibility, then you're capable.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very good advice. Final question from me is for product specifically, for product orgs or technology industry, but specifically for product management, what trends do you see emerging? Not technology trends, because I think we all know, like, we can go and Google that anywhere, but and see a bunch of stuff from different VCs and tech influencers. But for product teams and orgs and leaders, what are the trends, some of the things you think will become prominent next year for 2023, given that we're a week away, 2 weeks away from it?
Sure, yeah. It's inescapable to get away from the trend of the major sort of macro market shift, right? So we're in a time of constraint, fewer resources, smaller teams having to do more with less. No question about that. And then at the same time, as you've got that going on, you've got, incredible pressure to be able to drive the success of the business and drive that in a way that's going to be profitable in the near term, as opposed to, promise of profitability in, many, many future years out. So that's the big macro trend. And then from a product team perspective, that means how do you get really strong at identifying the metrics that really matter to your business, identifying the initiatives that are going to drive those things, and being able to scope small and drive towards them quickly. I think that's, across product management in 2023, that's what people are going to be focused on more than anything else.
Yeah. Final question, part 2.
Sure.
Is like team productivity, and obviously distributed teams. Some teams have got it nailed, some have not. How do you dial everybody in for like a maximum productivity? And I'm not just talking about like, chaining everyone to Slack and the desk for 8 to 10 hours a day, but what are the things you've put in place to make sure that your team is as productive as can be next year, whilst remaining engaged and happy at work?
Particularly around remote work, you mean, or in general?
Yeah. Well, in general, but I'll say remote. Yeah, I mean, I think just most product teams are distributed now. When you can't be there with them, like, what are the things that you've implemented to feel good about your team operating well next year?
Yeah, I would say that, the strength of an in-person environment is that you can have a lot of ad hoc discussion that fills in the gaps where your process or your sort of ways of spreading tribal knowledge are informal. That's what you get in an in-person setting that you have to then figure out how to counteract or how to replace in an online setting. And so to that, you have to be just very clear on responsibilities, processes, how the company is going to run, so that people are not stepping on each other. People aren't unclear who's supposed to be doing what. People feel like they have an area of ownership that they have autonomy over. So I think to the extent that you can do that and everybody has sort of clear set of responsibilities, then it becomes easier for all those people to collaborate. And the premium on that is so much higher when you're in this remote environment than it was in the in-person environment. Still became a frustration for people when that didn't exist in the in-person environment, but it didn't necessarily like grind things to a halt. When you're in a remote environment, then it can grind things to a halt because the communication, that informal communication layer, isn't there in the same way. Of course, there's a bunch of other stuff that you have to do as far as building the team spirit and morale and getting people rallied around a common set of goals and having it still feel like a communal thing, a bunch of those things. But I think underneath all that, the fundamentals is really, do people have ownership and do they have the ability to drive and have autonomy?
Yeah, I think it's a good way of wrapping up. I think, we talked about quite a lot of things here. The thing that really stands out through all the themes of like your joining Phil and your time at Zillow and how you look at like you prioritize hires and characteristics is, and to wrap up with the piece you just mentioned there about ownership and accountability, is really like tying everything back to mission. Seems to me like the common thread here of how you deliver a really good product, how you ship a really good product, how you enhance product features or market fit, whatever that is. It's like if you are tying to a mission, it's easier to do all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And same thing for recruiting too, right? If you're, want to attract people to your company, the best people want to do something that feels like it matters. And so that mission is really bringing that. So yeah, to me, the mission is by far the biggest thing that underlies everything. And, just from a human perspective too, we're only here for a little while. Better do something that matters. Spend our time on something important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's a very good way of rounding it up, especially year end and people going away and reflecting. That is one thing I wish more people would take into account of decision making, especially with careers. Is like, look, like you might get 30K, 40K, 100K a year more working there, but like you might also be miserable. Like, is that
yeah.
There is no real premium on that. So, Jonas, thank you very much. That was very, very insightful and helpful. And we'll make sure that many, many product professionals listen to that, and wish you a very lovely holiday.
Thanks. You too, Gareth.
Cheers.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Breakout. If you want to hear more, make sure to hit subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast to be the first to get notified when future episodes are released. If you like the show or want to share feedback, please leave a review so we can keep improving and share the word with other leaders in the tech talent space. If you have suggestions for topics we should cover, please feel free to reach out to either myself or Gareth.